obviously,
Great.
most of you know who Nick is, some more than others. Attended Boston University. He grew up here. And second, attended Boston University. Worked in Philadelphia with some nonprofits.
Yep, Broad Street Ministry.
Yep. Cool. And then Princeton Seminary, and you're now working at Goodwill, doing good things.
That's right. Well, yeah.
So I'm not going to talk. We're going to listen to you talk. So
Okay. Yeah.
more
Sorry.
Conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Doors in case the kids get loud.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Ely. Yeah. So this is interesting because obviously we mostly know each other, right? So great. But yeah. So for those of you that don't know, I'd be happy. I'm just going to kind of do a quick recap of the bio in a minute or two, and then I'd love to just kind of talk because I think that there's a lot of interesting work that's happening now, both in and outside the church, and I've always been really interested in how those two things kind of come together, right? What does ministry look like outside the church? What does it mean to have a calling outside the church? So that's what I'd love to talk about today. So again, my name is Nick. I grew up here, as some of you will recall, but not until I was in high school. So my folks aren't particularly religious. It was never sort of part of what it was for me growing up. But then in high school, I had a friend, Chris Meshberger, and his mom, Mary Ann Meshberger, who I think some of you may know. Well, Chris is going to do Niners, so why don't you do Niners? And it seemed like all my friends were doing Niners, so I was kind of, forced to. And for the first, maybe good part of the year, Niners was pretty much just eating pizza and meeting girls at Niners, and that was pretty much it. And then I remember distinctly though, we went on a mission trip to Mexico, and I remember very vividly shoveling sand, which I don't know why we had to shovel sand, but we had to shovel sand from one pile to some other pile. It was really hot and really dirty and just hard, just kind of physical work. And I remember feeling really happy. We were laughing, we were having fun, and that was the first time in my life where those two things had kind of, like, I had never felt that way before. Why am I doing work I'm not getting paid for? It's miserable. And yet I feel so content. There's nowhere else in the world I'd rather be, right? There's something to that. And so for me, that moment of just getting your hands dirty, right, doing the work, that to me was the light bulb that went off. So through the rest of high school, I spent a lot of time in this building, in Bible studies and youth group and all that kind of stuff. Read the Bible, read every book I could find about the Bible. I got my C.S. Lewis in, I got my Marcus Borg and Brennan Manning and all that good stuff. Brian Shivers, I'm sure all of us know. It's just a great sort of resource and support and mentor in a lot of ways. And so to make a long story short, by the end of high school, ministry, seminary was the life plan. So I went to college. I actually called Princeton Seminary in high school and said, "Hey, what should I major in?" And they said, "We don't care." Said, okay. So I was like, "I will be an English major because I like books and writing is helpful, and so that's what I'll do." So I had a very long and expensive book club for 4 years at Boston University. At that time, so my first priority is, all right, I'm going to engage in a good Christian community. And so BU is Boston is a relatively secular city, right? It doesn't have the same kind of church culture that you might find in the Midwest or the South, that kind of thing, predictably. But they have youth groups and they have congregations and all this kind of stuff. long time. It looks like you would expect. I mean, whatever your picture of Princeton Seminary, that's what it is. Like, that's what it looks like. There's no art. It took me a minute to figure this out. There's no art anywhere. There's no sculptures. It's just that, it's a good Presbyterian Princeton. It's exactly what it looks like. So that was kind of the conversation. This is a beautiful picture of what theological education has been for quite some time. Very prestigious, historical, all this kind of stuff. I was there. We celebrated our 200th, the bicentennial. It's unbelievable. But at the same time, there's this whole generation of people like myself that are so interested in getting engaged and learning not just Hebrew and church history, but also how do I speak Spanish? How do I run a nonprofit? How do I continue to roll up my sleeves in a professional capacity, right? Not just a high school youth group, but a full-time engaged person. That hooked me up with Wayne Meisel, who is, if you get into the Presbyterian world, and he's just one of those guys that you'll bump into sooner or later. People like him, people don't like him, but he is a known person. His background is really the service learning. So for a long time, his career was he's the president of the Bonner Center. So the Bonner Center is a scholarship-based program for students that traditionally couldn't afford college, but instead of like an athletic scholarship, it's a service scholarship. So Bonner scholars go to college. They're in a cohort of other Bonner scholars, and they do at least 10 hours of community service every week. So my job throughout seminary was working with the Bonner scholars at a nearby college and asking a lot of these same kind of questions, right? How do I take my theological training that I'm getting at Princeton? How do I take this theological education and apply it to working with these kids from really challenging backgrounds and helping them kind of get graduated and get these new leadership skills and life skills that they need to be successful. So thinking about all these ideas, and I'll try to get snappier here, we really thought critically, like what would it actually look like? So Wayne and I and a handful of other students, we started this thing called CAN, the Community Action Network, and the idea is really simple. Just we used federal work-study money to fund jobs for Princeton students in Trenton. So Trenton is kind of like Gary, right? It's a manufacturing city that isn't manufacturing anything anymore, right? So you can imagine the challenges. So what if we had Princeton Seminary students, instead of working in the library, something wrong with working in the library, that's great, but if you want something different, maybe you could get paid to go work at a housing organization in Trenton, or the food pantry in Trenton. How could you, and through, let's make that a field ed placement, right? What would that look like? So increasingly, just how do you apply this theological education to the real kind of nitty-gritty work of running a soup kitchen, right? That's what myself and a lot of other people were kind of interested in. So CAN kind of grew. It eventually became integrated into part of the seminary itself. I don't think that would have happened if we hadn't had a president change, right? So this is interesting. When you talk about change at this institutional level, most professors are like, yeah, it sounds great. Students are like, yeah, it sounds great. Presidents are usually like, yeah, that sounds interesting. It's the administration that's just like, no, let's not rock the boat, right? And so it really took that new president in that honeymoon phase where he could ruffle some feathers and it was okay because he was still the new guy to make that change happen. So kind of launching off of that, we started this thing called the New Faces of Ministry Tour. The idea being, if you're interested in shaping theological education to be a little bit more engaged, you don't want to lose the good stuff, the old stuff, but you're also thinking about how do we do this new thing. Again, it's difficult to make the change happen at the administrative level. Our strategy was, if you can bring in a whole new wave of students, what would happen? So instead of doing the typical recruitment for seminary at traditional Bible colleges, right? Instead of going to Wheaton and saying, hey, have you guys thought about Princeton Seminary? Let's go to an AmeriCorps site. Let's go to a young adult volunteer site. Let's go to a Teach for America conference, right? Let's go anywhere where we have young people that have expressed, talented people, especially, that have expressed an interest in service, may or may not have expressed an interest in faith, and let's talk to them about seminary, right? What is seminary? What is the potential value for them? what would that look like? The simple idea being there is a whole new wave of people who want to make the world a better place, right? And some of them want to be bankers, and some of them want to be accountants, and some of them want to be doctors, and all that kind of stuff. But there's this underpinning of, I want to help, right? I want to make the world better. So how do you translate that inkling or that idea or that feeling into a career, right? Into a real, a lifelong discipline. So those are the questions that I'm really interested in. That's kind of been my path. And those questions, towards the end of my theological training, kind of derailed the plans a little bit. Since high school, an ordained pastor in the Presbyterian Church was the plan. And by the very end of seminary, all those questions that we've been asking, each other and ourselves, it just kind of got to me and said, is my call outside of ordained ministry? And I talked to a lot of pastors and mentors and this kind of thing, and they said, you know what, get out there, do the work you're really interested in. If ordination is in your future, great, those skills will be that much more valuable. So, make this long story short, sorry. I got hooked up with, actually, somebody started at Princeton Seminary, and I was thinking about moving to Indiana. They had just come from Indiana. So we had a mutual friend that put us in touch. She said, you should really look at Goodwill. I said, why would I want to work at a thrift store? I don't know, check it out. So I came here and met Betsy Delgado, who's the vice president over what we call mission advancement. So it's kind of the do-goodery nonprofit part of this big retail operation. And I had no idea the Central Indiana Goodwill, which is really its own organization in a lot of ways. So the Goodwill in Arizona doesn't really have much to do at all with us. We just have similar, branding and name and stuff. This Goodwill is doing so many different things that I never knew about. So we run 11 adult high schools. We have a manufacturing center downtown, contract-based. Most of those employees have pretty serious barriers to employment. So they have, they usually don't have a diploma. Many of them have pretty extensive criminal records. A lot of them have different physical and mental disabilities. So these people are going to have a really hard time getting jobs anywhere else. But because it's this special setting and because we have special trained managers and people that can work with them, we're able to employ that population. And then the same goes for the stores as well. So certainly not all of our employees, but a lot of Goodwill employees. I mean, over half, and this is a 3,500 person organization, have some kind of barrier to employment. And those are again the big three. So my job right now at Goodwill, and this will kind of wrap us up, I'm what's called a retail guide. So I go into all the Goodwill stores in the Northwest, so that's 12 stores, probably 500 employees, give or take. And if any employee is interested in pursuing a job or an education goal, I'm there to make it happen. So that might be moving up within Goodwill, go doing the manager thing. More commonly, it's finding a new job completely outside of Goodwill. So I actively help get our people out of Goodwill, which is sometimes hurts the business. You take a rock star, customer service person or a cashier, or call them producers, like a wares producer, a textile producer out, kind of hurts the store. But that's really the mission, right? So you're helping people achieve economic self-sufficiency. We can't, as a business, afford to pay people, $12 an hour to do very basic tasks, right? So a lot of our folks are making $7.75, $8, $8.50. You can't build on that, right? People just need more income. So for a lot of people, that's finding a new job. So I work with do a lot of workforce development, so helping get people with new certifications. Welding, manufacturing in general is a huge industry that has a really high demand for good employees, good workers. So helping people get those skills. The medical industry, CMAs, medical assistant, farm tech, all that kind of stuff. And then the same thing with education. So helping people go back to school, get certified, you name it. So that's where I am today. That's what I'm working on. I don't know exactly what the future holds, but I think I was just saying, John, I love it. I love that I engaged in this community and I get to do this class and use some of that training that I got at Princeton and engage with it because it's just something I love and really care about. But I'm also out there just doing the work, right? So it's come full circle. It's back to that mission trip to Mexico. My faith has definition and meaning when I'm doing that kind of work. And it's not for everybody, and I don't think that everyone should be out doing that kind of stuff because we all have our own calls and our own sort of mission. But for me, that's where I am, and that's what makes sense for me. So to wrap it up, and obviously but we'll have more of a conversation. I wanted to bring this illustration I'm working on because for me, it really, in the way that art can, summarizes a lot of my thinking in a way that I think is helpful. So we mentioned actually just in this class, one of the things I really like about working in this medium of a simple black pen and a big old hunk of white paper is, if you're interested in theology, you have to be interested in truth, right? What is true? What is real? So I love that really simple, black and white, there's nothing fancy, there's no shading, there's nothing three-dimensional, it's just black and white truth, right? It's simple. But, as you can see, by using different levels of detail and different sort of shapes repeated over and over again, it gets kind of ambiguous, right? It looks like there are gray places and dark places and light places. It gets messy. And so for me, that has so much to do with how I understand faith and Scripture in particular, right? It is fundamentally true. It's also very slippery and ambiguous and gray in a lot of ways. So I love that image. And then finally, it actually is a sort of a depiction of the Gospels, like events in the Gospels in chronological order. But they kind of, if you follow the events in order, they sort of fold around and wrap around, which again I think speaks to that mystery and the timelessness of again, how I understand Scripture. So just as a few examples, so you have these kind of moments here. This is meant to represent Mary and Elizabeth, right? This pregnancy, and the angel is coming and telling them, hey, this is happening. You have the birth of Jesus, and these sort of angels are looking on. Eyes in a lot of artwork represent wisdom, and so that's kind of a theme throughout. So you can see maybe, probably need a magnifying glass for this stuff. But you have this sort of king figure here with this crown. So this is Herod, the three eyes, right? The three wise men. They kind of travel back. So right here, they're looking at Jesus, and they travel to Herod. You've got this kind of figure with this cloak thing, so it's a flight to Egypt. Time goes on. We're out in the wilderness. This is the river. There's John. There's a dove descending. And we're out in the wilderness again. You have this crazy tentacle monster thing. It's sort of meant to capture this moment of temptation, right? So Jesus is in the wilderness. The devil's there. But then there are these three sort of sharp refutes. And there's all kinds of, there's a lot more stories sort of woven in. So I love this, again, because it helps describe kind of where I am. So you can look at this and say, wow, this is an interesting piece of art. And you would never necessarily pick up that it has anything to do with Christianity or religion or that kind of thing. So I think, again, Scripture has an inherent beauty and truth and mystery to it, and we don't always have to know exactly what it means or what it all, this sort of boxed, this is what it is, right? It can be beautiful for its own sake. So yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. There you go. What are you guys thinking about? What would you like to know?
I think you're a revolutionary.
A revolutionary. A zealot. Perfect. It gets you into trouble. You gotta be careful. Yeah.
A little late for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you do some kind of artwork while you're up in Philadelphia?
Yeah, this thing has taken. I vastly underestimated how long it takes to do this style. But yeah, I started this in Philly, so that was 5-6 years ago. It's not like I work on it every day. That would be great. That doesn't always happen.
Did you start down in that corner?
Yep, starting in that corner, and I've drawn it chronologically, so it just kind of weaves like this. And you can see right here, so this is the most recent that I'm doing. So this is the death of Judas and Jesus. So in a lot of religious traditions, especially Buddhism, so maybe you've heard of a mandala before. So it's this image, it's a very symmetrical thing, but it's supposed to be a guide in meditation. And there's different traditions that use kind of a similar concept. So for me, that the image of a mandala, this like repeating sort of central image, represents sort of a religious guide, religious teacher. So that's why Jesus in this particular piece is often depicted as this mandala, right? So this is his birth. This is him in the temple, this kind of thing. This is the wilderness. So this, which is to represent his death here, is this mandala, but it has a tear, right? It's broken. And then this will be the sort of resurrection moment is going to sort of circle the whole thing. So, but in terms of the planning, I started with just a list of like maybe 30 moments from the Gospels that I really liked that I thought would be sort of easy to represent visually, and just kind of started going one by one. So there's not a lot of planning, honestly. Just kind of start doodling. So
My doodles don't look
yeah.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. And the hope, what I'd love to do, and I've been talking about it for years, and now that it's like popular, I'm like, I really missed a chance. Those adult coloring books are so great, right? Like I think it's a really helpful. I'm big in the spiritual discipline, right? It's the discipline of doing this simple, monotonous thing like coloring in a complicated design. I think can be an aid in meditation and spiritual depth. So what I'd love to do is when this thing's finally done, is isolate each little moment or each little portion and create a devotional. So it's like an adult coloring book with each page is a segment of this crazy thing, with the scripture passage that it sort of is supposed to represent, maybe a little, maybe not, a little comment. And the idea is you just meditate on that, sort of like Lectio style, as you color it in. So this will never be colored in by me. Hopefully other people will color it in, and that will be fun. But I don't think I'll have the patience. When it'll be done, it'll be done. I don't mess with it anymore. Yeah.
I don't like to have a full cup of coffee next to you.
There's a strict no liquids policy. Yep. So I have a little table that I've got set up. It's a liquid-free zone.
Yes.
I'd love to eventually. So Apple has these. It's really cool. Like the pencil is this new thing coming out, and that would be kind of neat because one of the hardest things with the size is just rotating the paper to get the right lines. So I think the next big crazy project is going to be on a tablet, actually.
What kind of pen?
They're called. Yep. They're called micron pens. They're cheap. You can get them at Target or Hobby Lobby or whatever. Yeah. So they're just little. I don't have one on me, but they're not ballpoint. They're just really simple, but they're really finely pointed. So yep. The common. They're just acid-free archival ink. They're like a piece. Been through I don't know, like 30 pens so far in this thing, at least. Because it takes forever. It's those little it's like this, like that takes a minute, right? That's no big deal. It's all these little hatch marks. It just take forever. But again, I like the discipline of it, right? Sitting down and tick, 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 tick. It's good. It's good discipline.
It's interesting when we first showed it in class, my initial thought was, oh, it's a cell.
Okay.
A cell.
From a doctor.
Yeah.
Sure.
It looks like the organelles within the cell as a whole, and it's developed organically over the years, and the basis, it's, when you first found it out, I'm like, what's he showing this mitochondria?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's very few, if any, actually, like straight lines. It's all very curvy and organic is the right word. Yeah.
What's your mindset actually work? Contact concerning events, or is it physical, spiritual, or how are you as an artist working?
So I like to think of, again, the moment, right? So we read the scripture passage. So if it's the angel announcing to Mary and Elizabeth that they're going to be pregnant, or birth, or this is easy, right? Like his hand, right? The healing of leprosy, this kind of thing. I like to think about the moment and just try to capture, very simply, just kind of the emotion of it, right? how does the passage feel? What would it feel like? And then just kind of meditating on it. And sometimes I think, so I finish this damn thing. That's the thought sometimes. But sometimes it's also like a pretty spiritual, calming kind of thing. So my job is, as you can imagine, to deal with a lot of people and a lot of crisis situations. So it's nice to come home and put some music on and do this. This is very relaxing. So this will.
I assume those are clouds, or
Yeah. So let's.
those two things.
Yeah. So these are. This is meant to be Lazarus, right? From the
Okay.
So this is these kind of mummified guys transitioning from one to the other. You've got these little orbs that are all over the place. You'll see a lot of those. Those generally are people. So crowds. When Herod is ordered, the death of the young boys, there's all these tiny little orbs that are kind of breaking here all around. So here, there's a lot of this sort of casting out demons. So you've got the orbs and these weird tentacle things kind of coming out. And again, what I said, where it's not linear, it's not start to end, it kind of wraps around into the chronology. So I like that because you'll have the temptation in the wilderness here. And then however long or later, you've got these exorcisms, but the sort of two elements kind of combine a little bit. So it just kind of folds back on itself.
So you had the whole thing in your mind, a general plan before you started.
I had sort of the moments that I wanted to capture laid out in a timeline, and that's about it. So I don't, yeah, give or take, yep. And so there's no.
So when those two elements come together, that was just kind of happenstance?
Exactly, yep. Which I think is kind of fun,
Yeah.
right? So why have it all, I mean, it'd be a hassle to plan it all out.
The details are coming as you do it.
Exactly, and again, and this is something I like, so people, the comment I get a lot is, oh, it's so, perfect and pristine and this kind of thing. If you get up with a magnifying glass, you will see hundreds and hundreds of mistakes, right? Lines crossing over lines that aren't supposed to, circles that are kind of wonky and wobbly. So that's another thing I like in terms of the image of kind of what this quote unquote means. I love that it's just riddled with mistakes, but the consistent discipline of making it that detailed, they just get lost, right? You don't look at it and see, well, that's a clumsy hand that this artist has. You're just kind of overwhelmed by the detail. So all those little mistakes are washed away, so to speak. But I mean, look at it. Like, that's not a circle. That's a terrible circle, right? I mean, really, yeah, but it's kind of lopsided. Yeah, but I mean, these lines, like this is meant to be, the same width, right? That ring, but it's not. Right? It's like more narrow there and thicker there, and yeah, it's not. I'm certainly not the best hand at this kind of stuff, right? There's people that can do.
It is an engineering drawing.
Sorry.
It is an engineering drawing.
Right, yeah, it's certainly not perfect in lots of ways. But who cares, right? There's so much detail, yeah. Yeah, exactly, so it's fun.
I think it's interesting to know your background. Like, I like it that you prefaced it, your story. I was thinking my neighbor Foster was here. We needed to know who he was to understand his art. His presentation. Wow. Two literal people.
Yeah.
And it has.
It's got a story, right?
Your story is very distinctive, Nick, and I also was very much instructed by it. I'd like to link it to this picture. Thank you very much. This really helps. I've not mentioned before, so this really does help. Both parts of it help. I think the Reformed tradition, I think, has been hoping that people would appear like you. And I want to ask you about that. Whether you felt any resistance to the idea that despite all the myth out there, people with a real call are ministers, are people who speak to you, people who speak clearly to you about God and all that. The rest of the people who are listening don't have either the sort or the elevation of call that the preachers do, or the priests do. Calvin struggled with that. I'm going to get John in on this as well. And I think we all do, and I'm not sure we do it successfully. I'm not sure what we're successful at is lifting up the equity, the equality of the significance of all calls, clerical and lay. And if this isn't a call, what is? I mean, like we can hear that kind of authenticity, but outside of this room, you talk to layperson after layperson, and they're not as excited or as confident, I've found, as you are about the life that is within you. I think in some respects the church is responsible for that, and it has been for centuries. Priestcraft, So I'm happy to know you, and wonder if you share my sense of the struggle and the fight here to get lay ministry on an equal standing, level playing field between lay ministry and clergy.
Well, I think part of the challenge is our tradition, right? So as Presbyterians, we've always said, you've got to know Greek, you've got to know Hebrew, you've got to take theology. And I think, great, right? Like that's part of why I'm Presbyterian. I like that our leaders have an education and know what the heck they're talking about. That's great. I think the flip side and part of the challenge is it creates that, it's like, there's that economic term for it. When there's a disparity of knowledge, right? Like that's why you kind of get scammed at a car dealership because they know a lot about cars and you don't, and so you kind of get, I think we have some of that, right? So it's like, well, Pastor, you know all this stuff, I don't really feel like I know that much, and it just kind of creates this divide that, I think you said it right, we need to change the message a little bit and really focus on bringing up people's calls. And honestly, I think another part of it, and that's what I was talking about, being in Princeton and kind of thinking about what would theological education look like if it wasn't just for people that wanted to be ordained pastors, right? Like, isn't there something else that this thing can do? I think it's a really interesting question, and I think that at the end of the day, I'm a big process guy. I think the process that you have in place is going to basically determine who you get on the other end. And so if you think about what is the process of theological education today, who goes, why do they go, what is the experience like, and where do they end up on the other side? It is really built, and I don't think intentionally, but just the way it turns out now, it's not very conducive to creativity. It says most people, if you even know what the heck seminary is, it's because you're already very much in the church community. You know a lot about it, you've grown up with it, you probably know pastors, personally, I don't know what that means.
Goes to John.
I hope so.
Loves you.
Great, drawing flies, great.
At least it's not a vulture.
Right. So you know pastors, you're in that world, you know what seminary is like, you've heard of the term before, you have a picture of what it is. It's the people that have never, you go on this road trip, like this New Faces of Ministry tour, you go, all right guys, what do you think when I say seminary? Most people are like, celibacy, right? Like they just don't, there's a picture of like monks off on a mountain somewhere. There's not this idea of like, I went to seminary and now I work at Goodwill, and like that, there's no disconnect. Like one thing totally prepared me for the other thing. And I love it, right? Like that's a new idea for a lot of people. So one, the people that are going through this process of discerning the call, ordained or not, you're already getting a pretty specific population. People that have a very clearly defined understanding of this is what this thing is. And when you get there, and obviously there's lots of different seminaries and some are better at this than others, but Princeton, the old school, Princeton, the curriculum doesn't change that much. It's pretty much, this is how it is, this is what the education looks like, this is what your experience is going to be, and we're going to train you basically to be an associate pastor, right? Because we're not going to do like budget, like this is how a session really works. You don't get any of that kind of stuff. You get the theology and the whatever, and then when you become an associate pastor, the senior pastor kind of takes you under their wing, and this is how you really run a church, right? You learn the real skills, like this is how you have to do a budget. Like this is important to figure out. So the actual institution itself, the process is very Again, I don't think anybody wants it to be this way. It's just how it happened. It's very regulated and it's difficult to be creative. And then the ordination process itself, there are a lot of requirements and there are a lot of specific requirements. This is what it looks like and this is what you have to do. And I think if you talk to a lot of people that are on these, these committees and the CPM boards and all this kind of stuff, most people say, I'd love to have some creativity in this process, but this is the way it is right now, and we have to follow the rules, right? That's what we believe. That's part of our tradition. So I think the net result is the people that have gone through this process, beginning to end, getting a very specific kind of type. And until the process changes, you're just going to get that result.
I'd like to broaden the question. You talked about the perceived difference between the pastor and the congregation in general. What I wonder about is how is the congregation brought along to the point where they feel that they are, for lack of a better term, theologically learned enough to feel like that gap has been reduced. And at the same time, I wonder about the direction you're talking about there, and just as far as that's concerned, for all of us, how do we balance our theology, our, for the term, evangelism, and our work, however that work is? How do we interact with where we're at in a theologically based and informed, and yet at the same time meet the basic thing, go out into all the world and tell them about me, was our command. So how do we balance all of those things as being trained, as being pastors, as being laymen?
I'm just maybe picking up on that, jumping in a bit. I do think, I have a friend who teaches at Princeton Seminary that Nick, I'm sure knows, named Dale Luger, who believes that the biggest mistake the Presbyterian Church ever made was distinguishing a class of people to be ministers of word and sacrament. Because he feels that what that did, from a mission standpoint, if you think of the early church, it's the people gathering together, wrestling with Scripture, and saying, how are we going to live this out in the world? And what we've got, we don't have to rehearse for historical reasons, but we've set aside a class of people to tell the rest of us the way things are, and in many cases to do the ministry, thus leaving a lot of folks, there's a kind of passivism, passive, not pacifist, but passive, that says, well, it's other people do that.
Yeah, but if you look at what happened to the Quakers,
Well,
the Quakers said, and
right.
so then you end up with a whole history of the silent meeting,
Right.
where nobody says anything and there is no knowledge.
Right. Well, and that's where I was going to go to. So that Nick has mentioned, and Wayne, I think as well, the training. But I think it's not so much the training, it's the structure. So I'm not ordained, I think maybe you know, and that's been a choice for me.
Say more about that.
Don't tell anybody, okay? Don't tell anybody.
We promise to keep it a secret, but say more about it.
I'm a lifelong, I was raised in the Presbyterian Church, but I just did not buy. So I love the Book of Confessions. I'm not as keen on the Book of Order because of this.
Who is?
And because of this hierarchy. Because I think it stifles creativity. It stifles
With the ruling elders and the teaching
Yeah,
elders.
I mean, so people feeling like, hey, I can wrestle with the Bible myself and read and get training. So my vision would be in be trained in Scripture and being able to integrate how I live my life with in a knowledgeable Christian way, kind of what Nick is talking about, what a lot of young folks are interested in. So I think the education, if that's the right word, the training, the backdrop, I think that's important. The thing for me is, why do you have to go off to seminary to do that? I'm not knocking seminaries, but part of the reason after teaching the seminary for 18 years, shifted into more church-based work before now is because I kind of joke that I felt like after 18 years of me telling my students that theology was for the church more than the academy, that God was telling me to put up or shut up. Sort of a joke, but if you really believe that, do this in the church. And so, because I think you're right in the things that we're talking about. The future of the church is going to be people who are parts of congregations who are engaged and doing the work. We do it together, not here's the staff and does it. And I'm not knocking that, right? I'm not saying it's all bad, but I think it's a real challenge for us. So I'll just say a statistic just to tell you what's happening in the global church. In the Oxford Encyclopedia of World Christianity that was published in 2001, sociologists identified, I believe, 25,000 distinct Christian communities. 25,000 that they determine are unlike each other, okay? Comprising 30 to 40 million people who consider themselves, now listen to this, neither Protestant, Orthodox, or Catholic, because they believe that all of three of those groups live with hierarchies that they did not see in Scripture. They labeled this group in 2001 the Neo-Apostolic Christian movement, and projected that by 2025 that group will be bigger than every other Christian group except the Roman Catholic Church. And it will be more than double the size of Orthodox and Protestants put together. Now, I think that that's the spirit at work. And it's a challenge to us Presbyterians, and I love Presbyterians, and I believe in our theology, but it's part of the challenge. So I think this class and what Nick's talking about are so important because it can be for all of us to say, yeah, how am I going to do that? And how can we be trained together so that we feel good about that, that we feel educated and trained.
But you look at what the studies show about what the next generation believes, and it's not anywhere near Orthodox theology.
We've got our work cut out. Well, that's a quick comment on that. Ken Dean, a friend of mine, teacher at Princeton Seminary, wrote a book which you've probably heard of called Almost Christian. And basically says, folks today are not, it's just what you're saying. And she says the problem has been the church. Where did the kids get this goofy theology? And it's us, not Second Presbyterian Church. We're great. As far as
by definition.
Yeah. But yeah, so we've got it, and as part of that, because we think, oh yeah, if you want training, you go off to seminary or go off to Bible college. But instead of saying, we should do it.
Right.
And then how do you create adult Sunday school classes?
Yeah. Well, this class that was sort of the impetus behind it is we've got people right here within Second Pres that are living their faith in unique and valuable ways beyond this building. And so how do we show how this can be done? And Nick's a prime example, but not everybody has to have attended seminary to do that. That just happens to be the path that you took.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of that, but I think especially here, because we have a history of having such notable scholars and theologians and whatnot, it's a little intimidating to say, well, I think I'm doing a pretty good job, or maybe I could teach a class or whatever, because you don't have this string of numbers behind you, or letters behind your name with different degrees. But I think because in other Presbyterian churches I've belonged to, and I have a friend who's a Methodist pastor, and in her congregation, you know, there are people leading the adult education classes. It's not a lecture, it's not the sage on the stage kind of thing, it's just ordinary people that are able to do that, and I don't know how they feel they have that background. My grandfather taught adult Sunday school for decades and decades, and he was not a theologian per se, but he just led the discussion. So that's different from the way things have traditionally been here.
So I would just say that I am open to ideas about how we develop an adult Sunday school that accomplishes the things we're talking about.
If I had them, I would tell you.
Yeah, but I say that just every place I've been. If you've got ideas, send me an email, give me a call, let's have lunch, let's get together, because we got to figure this out. Our future is at stake.
So Nick, I had a question. When you were in seminary, when you made that decision between ordained pastor and worker in the world, whatever, was that a conflict that you had to work through, or how did that decision come about? Because you said early on you felt like the ordained ministry was the path, but that's clearly not where you ended up so far. So how did that discernment happen?
Working in churches. You know, that's the tremendous value of field ed, is you get out there and do the work. And I had 2 jobs all the way through grad school. And one was working with the Bonner Foundation, working with these kids, doing the nitty-gritty social justice-y stuff. And the other job was alternating pretty traditional churches. And I love both of those, but I just kind of, if I was honest, I just kind of felt more alive with the first one. I just felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do. Not that one is better or anything like that, but just kind of, that's, you know, the way I talked about those 2 jobs to people. It was like, oh, I go to, you know, Second Pres in, you know, Bridgewater, New Jersey, or Bonner, you know, you can just kind of feel it. So, yeah, and then again, kind of just to time that, and then everything we're talking about, look, the Navy, their slogan now is a force for good, right? But that's actually pretty, that's insane if you think about it, right? Like, my younger sister is, by all measures, talented, bright, whatever. She got denied to teach for America because they have so many applicants they can pick and choose, right? The Peace Corps, their enrollment is up 30% over the last few years. I mean, it's unbelievable. At the one hand, I mean, to get into college, you have to do service now. Like, to get into, you know, the good schools, you have to do service. It's just part of our institutions at this point. So, on the one hand, you have a generation of people, and I understand the skepticism about millennials and even younger, and, you know, this sort of slacktivism. I get all that. But at the end of the day, these are real numbers. The Navy's slogan really is a force for good. If we have a moment in our history where we have so many young people that are thinking and talking about how can I do good in the world, we have a church that's not able to be a place for young people to explore those ideas, we're toast. I mean, that's, for me, that is the opportunity. So what does it look like? You know, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it was a mission trip. It was doing the work to the garden, it's the food pantry. It's church is a place that's doing good. Right? I mean, you talk to especially young people, and they say, church, but you ask them about the Pope or nuns or whoever. Like, I like those guys, right? Like, I feel like they care about people, they're doing the work. I don't believe in the same stuff, but I just, for whatever reason, it's not for whatever, there are specific reasons, church feels to a lot of young people like the place with all the rules. They don't like these people, they don't like these people, and that's what church is. Church, for me, needs to be a place that is feeding hungry people and sheltering people that don't have homes, and just doing that work. Again, it's not for everybody. Not everybody is called to do that. I don't think they should be. But like I said, for me, it's simple. Like, such an interest in service and engagement. And at the same time, people struggling to figure out, what does that mean? How do I take that feeling of I want to do good and develop it into a career? If the church can't be a place for people to explore and understand and develop their understanding of that call, I don't know what we're doing, you know. So, yeah.
It's fascinating that I look at sense of being called to do good was to be a missionary. And today, the sense to be good is now feed the hungry.
Where you are.
It's doing something for people rather than changing people.
And it's I mean, it's scary, but Nike is better at community service a lot of times than the church, right? Like large international corporations have figured this out. I mean, they're not, I mean, they know that they need to attract top talent, they gotta be a space, and top talent, and it's a value. So, I mean, the Lilly Day of Service, right? These big companies have realized we gotta be a place that not just, makes stuff, but we have to be a force for good in the world if we're gonna attract and be a company that people like. I mean, it's just social investment is socially conscious investing is a growing field. I mean, it's this. It's in the water.
I struggle with losing though the change people aspect.
Well, I'm reminded of this group, and I can't remember the name, but it's been going to college campuses. A few weeks ago, they were at our just recently, and it's a family of Christians that basically stand on the sidewalk and yell at everyone that they're doomed to hell because they drink.
Baptist Church? Or?
It wasn't Westboro, but it was like Jeff something or whatever. But it was a similar message. It was like, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, it was a huge thing, and at Paul, where my son is, it led to a lot of rallies and some discussions around, okay, how do we include all these people? But the initial response was, holy smokes, why would you ever want to be a Christian if that's what it is? And because all they're doing is condemning and condemning and condemning, and said, you are doomed to hell, but Jesus loves you. And it's like, what? So that's the whole, I always think of you're the Bible that people see. So, the way you live your life is what might change people rather than standing up and screaming at somebody that they're evil. So I don't know. It's just
right. But there's no question that the way you live your life is important. And until you have the respect of someone, you can't really talk to them about change. And so, yeah, it's part of it. But I like I say, I worry about the overemphasis on service as an end. I think it has an end, but how do we do service and explain that I'm doing this because I know that Christ loves me and He loves you also. And so this is how do we balance the speaking of our theology with the acting of our theology?
For me, it just comes down to doing it well, right? There's good ways to do community service, there's bad ways to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully, if we've done the hard work of really thinking through it and understanding why, and hopefully there's some really good theological underpinnings of, well, I don't really want to do handout, I want to have a partnership with somebody and understand that I have something that they need and they have something that I need. I mean, that's hopefully a theological, that's coming from a deeply thought, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully, when you're looking around and Lilly is doing community service and Nike is doing community service and the Navy is saying they're a force for good, hopefully the church is just doing it better, right? And figured out those pieces.
Yeah.
That's my hope. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's something else too. I mean, the way we frame this question, sorry to diminish the church, but what's the difference between the church and the Rotary Club? When I say we love the Rotary Club, they do great work in our community, but we think we're something more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that? And I think it's a good question for all of us to wrestle with. Because kind of what you're getting at. I mean, is there something else that's also in the mix here?
Yeah. Well, I think of the government programs. do a lot of good, but it's typically take the money and get out of my way. If the church can't say, let me come along and help you and guide and support you when you're feeling down, or when you feel like the paper the other day, the guy was talking from the 10 thing, 10-point coalition, talking about running into this guy and talking to him, and after he got finished, the guy said, I'm glad I talked to you because I was just on the way to kill this guy because he disrespected me, which is a fascinating term. Coming into use of language as a verb rather than to respect someone as a noun. That whole, it's a fascinating change in mindset.
Well, we've run over just a little bit,